Like insanely nice outside.
It's so nice. I was like, it'd be nice, what if we had a board outside? Yes, I was actually thinking about it, like,
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mark.
How do we do that?
Yeah, logistics.
okay, on this beautiful, fine day, I called this special meeting, regarding policy on March 13th. We have a few items to approve minutes, and so I will go through that. I move to approve the minutes from the special meeting and open session dated July 22nd, 2024.
Second, I'm sorry.
Second, Ali. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes 4-0. He just went on camera. Okay, I move to approve the minutes from the special meeting and open session dated August 27, 2020.
Second.
Second, Ali. All those in favor? Okay, that's 4-0. Motion passes. I move to approve the minutes from the special meeting and open session dated February 19th, 2025.
Second.
Second, Ali. All those in favor? Okay, that's 4-0. Sorry, Megan, I didn't ask you about you. Okay. So we are going to be moving in. We have 4 policies tonight, one regarding our Title IX, as well as a policy that we worked on as a board in one of our retreats around the expectations / ways of working for the board. And then 2 from that 15, the original 1540, we parsed out some possible policies around job descriptions and then conflict of interest. So we'll start with Title IX, policy 8012A, and we have Avetta here with us tonight, who will go ahead and give us context as to the changes and the updates. And then from that point, we'll then go into a conversation about that policy. And all of these are considered our first read tonight. Go ahead, Avetta, if you are there.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Again, hello, everyone. I'm pretty sure I've met all of you, but again, my name is Yvetta Sloan. I'm the Title IX coordinator for the district. I hope everyone's having a great evening. I don't have a whole lot prepared, so I'm, not going to take up too much of your time. But if you recall, I was before you all back in June of 2024 to present changes to the district's 2020 Title IX policy to bring it in compliance with new regulations that came out in 2024. So for example, some of the 2024 changes did things like broaden the scope of what is considered sexual harassment under Title IX. It added protected categories such as gender identity, sexual orientation, sex characteristics, sex stereotypes. It provided flexibility on how to file complaints. It just changed things like, complaints had to be signed versus, it could be something verbal over the phone. It provided flexibility in participating in informal resolution. It extended review periods, just some other like complaint process related items. There were some changes there. So at that time, we needed to update our 2020 policy. We ended up, making some really minor changes to bring it in compliance. And I say we made really minor changes because if you recall, I mentioned back then that our 2020 policy pretty much already encompassed much of what were considered new regulations for the feds. So, for us, nothing really changed. Everything, since that time, since updating it, everything's still pretty much been flowing the same. Nothing has changed for us and how we do things and who's protected. But as you can imagine, with the new administration coming in, as of January 9th, those 2024 changes were vacated. And institutions have been instructed to revert back to 2020. So I mean, that's basically why I'm here tonight, is to propose the changes that we made to our current Title IX policy. It just simply reverts us back to our previous 2020 policy. And again, like I stated back then, these changes aren't going to change much for us. The changes in 2024 didn't create any significant shift in how we do things, and reverting back isn't going to make much of a change. So for example, no
Yvette?
protected, yes.
Oh, it's Petra. Can I just say one quick thing about the papers that everyone has in front of them so they know what they're looking at?
Yep, so I was just about to bring that
Oh, sorry.
up. So there are some copies in front of you, and just for example, like no protected categories are going to be lost with this revision to 2020, and that's why those copies are in front of you. I wanted to make sure that the policy reflects those same categories. So that was one last revision that I made to the policy after documents and things had been uploaded. So you'll notice in that first paragraph, another change that I just recently made, but that just includes all those same categories. Those are the same categories that were we considered in 2020. Those are the categories for the 2024 regulations, and they'll be the same going forward. I just happened to notice that those weren't identified in our Title IX policy, and I think that has a lot to do with because it's our 80-12 policy, which is our non-discrimination policy, that really breaks down all of the categories that are covered. So I think when they extended our non-discrimination policy and had 80-12A, which is Title IX, they just used the term sex for everything. But I just thought it was important to make sure that although I know what groups are protected, and all of us in legal services do, that families and students and folks that are reading the policy actually see the protected groups that are covered in our policy. So that's why you have those copies. Petra, if you wanted to add anything else about those copies, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Yvette. Just so everyone understands, so there are two red lines, and I know generally there's one. So the first red line, I believe the ink looks kind of pink on it. That is the one that has human resources struck on the top, if you can see the color difference there. So this is the original red line that we had submitted previously. And then when Yvette had mentioned adding protected classes, that is represented by the second red line. There is text on page 1 that's highlighted. So that's the additional protected classes that she just mentioned, including back in. And so if you can just imagine if these two were together, that is what the proposed policy would be. And so at the next time that we read it, they will be incorporated. So the only change is on page 1, as she indicated. And then if you flip, so this is the one with the highlighted one, to page 3, you'll see those same protected categories reflected there. And so that would be the only additional change to the pink colored red line. And that would be the entirety of the red line, then the proposed changes that I just went over.
And we'll make sure to update board
Yep.
docs with the ones merged as well. And then you'll also see here, you'll see a proposed changes. So just imagine that what Yvette mentioned just about the protected classes will be added in on that proposed policy. And then the other document that has nothing redlined or anything marked is the previous policy. So it's what our current policy states. So again, the proposed one is reverting back to our 2020 policy around Title IX, and then adding the protected classes in there. So giving board members a few minutes just to kind of digest. I do see Ali's hand first. Are you prepared, Ali, to? Okay, go ahead.
So my first question is, there is a discipline and sanctioned space. It says board members who violate this policy are subject to removal from their elected office, being barred from the district premise, district activities, and may be instructed to applicable remedies of law. Can you tell us what page that is? Second to last.
Second to last.
So violations, disciplines and sanctions. My understanding is that in order for board members to be removed from their elected position, they either have to resign or they have to be recalled. This doesn't mention either of those processes, so I'm wondering how that works.
So that's probably a question that I'll probably have to consult and get back to you on that. I'm just gonna be completely honest with you. Of course, as you know, that situation has never come up in the time that I've been here. So I'll have to get some more clarity around how that portion of the policy is expected to be executed if that were to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking just because I'm like, it feels inconsistent with my understanding.
Mhm.
But it is, you know, I think it's educationally interesting and worth being informed about. My second question and last question is really Title IX is an expression of the federal government's policy. We have changed this policy in relationship to the last two administrations. Is there a reason why we're changing this policy now versus waiting to see what the current presidential administration wants to do with Title IX?
So I would give that to Petra.
Yeah.
And maybe Dr. Gothard, if you'd like to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, so I can say, and then if Yvette wanted to fill in as well, a dear colleague letter from the Department of Education was released, saying that school districts now need to roll back to the 2020 regulations. So it's direct response to that letter directing us to do so.
Yes. Yes, that's my understanding.
Can I ask who issued that letter?
Oh, it was the Department of Education. I can find the letter and it as well.
I guess I am curious about why that process looks so different than it has in the past two iterations of the administration. Basically, it feels strange to have the Department of Education issue a note saying revert to this without going through the normal channels and process to reestablish what Title IX should be.
You know what? I'm just just talking out loud, and Petra, you can tell me if I'm wrong. My take is that the 2020 regulations were Trump's, like it was his administration, it was his idea, that
Yes.
it was their policy. So I think that the consensus is to pretend like 2024 never even happened and just go back to the, how they had written it out. That was my take on it.
I feel like I understand that instinctively, and I appreciate the explanation. What I'm asking you though is that legal? Is that a legal way that we run our government right now? Is that we're gonna pretend that there was no administration between this version of the Trump administration and the last? Are we required to embrace that approach? Is that a legal approach to ways of working?
Yeah.
I appreciate the question. I guess just to circle back to my prior answer, I'll be candid and say that my colleagues in legal worked more closely with our reasoning for adopting the change. I did. And so that's a question that I can definitely follow up with them and provide more clarity to, in addition to the fact that we're responding to colleagues.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that question makes me tremendously uncomfortable. And the implications of what this process looks like are not I can't enthusiastically embrace that. And I appreciate the work you all have done to try to be in alignment with of education. But I feel like I need the answer to that question before I can vote to bring us back 4 years. That's it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. I think we can definitely bring back a response next time we read this. And then also get the response just about the board members in violation of the policy. I think one thing to note, what Avetta mentioned at the beginning was that even with reverting back to our 2020 policy, our children and our family, like our district is still like folks are still protected under that one. But I understand, like, I have the same thoughts. And I think like we still be protected in ways. So that's just my initial thoughts on that. But yeah, any other board members? Laura?
Yeah, I'm sorry if you already said this, what is not in the current proposed version that, or the proposed version that's in the current version?
The yellow.
Right, so,
Highlights, you know.
right, so there's those, just that that's the only difference between what we have right now and what we're proposing, is to add just,
No.
no, okay,
So let me explain it again. So the red line version, I know.
yeah,
The red line version is what we originally submitted to revert back to 2020. And so that is, so it takes the one with no red line, red lines it,
right.
right? You can come up with the proposed.
So, yeah, so I guess what I'm wondering,
However,
yeah,
then Avetta caught that we should probably be explicit in when we say who's protected. And so she's adding the yellow into that proposed,
right.
right?
And I appreciate adding those categories. I feel like it's
Yeah.
really important right now. And I don't feel at all capable of looking at both of these in full and comparing word for word at this moment to see what we're taking out
Mhm.
in order to be in compliance with what they're asking for. So I'm wondering, is there somebody here who has done that, say, what, I'm assuming we're losing some protections. I'm just starting. Is that true?
Well, we're not, because our 2020 policy,
Yeah,
we already included things like sexual orientation and gender identity. And we have two categories covered under our Title IX policy. One is sexual harassment, and that encompasses like all of the definitions of sexual harassment that are defined at the federal level. But we also include a section for sexual misconduct. And that's kind of like, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it's a catch-all for anything else that doesn't fall under, what's typically considered sexual harassment. If it's not quid pro quo, or it's not, one of the serious offenses like sexual assault or rape, there's a lot of other things that can go on, like, picking on someone based on a sex characteristic, calling a female, a stereotypical name, things like that do happen. That is also covered. That's what falls in that sexual misconduct category. So again, yeah, that 2020 policy that MMSD has, from what the feedback that I've received, is like the program at MMSD has always done above and beyond a lot of other districts. And it captures everything. So going back to it, we're not losing anything. And we were already a step ahead of the game when we were under the 2020 regulations. The 2024 regulations, we changed things like the wordings of definitions, but we didn't hardly change anything about our process. We didn't change anything about who's covered. It didn't change, who can file a complaint, how they can file a complaint. Our program has pretty much remained consistent.
okay, so why? Did we change the wording of definitions for clarity, or to be more expansive, or?
I changed the wording of definitions to match the 2024 definitions. So when
Okay.
when those regulations came out, I forget what it's called, but it's like 1,500 pages long. And so I went through that and made sure that we were defining everything the same way that they were defining everything.
Okay, so
And
then,
now go ahead.
so then in the proposed version, we're reverting back to the other, the definitions from 2020,
Exactly.
which you're
Which
saying,
were in, exactly, which were in compliance with the 2020 regulations.
okay, so other than the definition, what else should we be aware of that is a difference between the 2020 and the 2024?
Nothing has changed as far as our process. There are things that have to do with the complaint process. For example, under the 2020 regulations, you have to file a formal complaint in order to be provided the option of informal resolution. Under the 2024 regulations, that was not the case. You could offer informal resolution without someone filing a complaint. So there are pieces of the complaint process that were tweaked and adjusted under 2024, like that were changed. But that type of information isn't in the policy. That type of information is in the sexual harassment procedure manual.
Okay.
And so that accompanies the policy. Whenever we share the policy with folks, we also share that manual. So all that information will match 2020 regulations. But there were a lot of changes under 2024 that are not necessarily reflected in that policy. But what was reflected was, making sure our definitions were in alignment, such as a formal complaint. Under 2020, a formal complaint was defined as a signed document, right? Under 2024, a formal complaint could be a verbal request for the district to investigate. So if you look at formal complaint in the policy, those were the kinds of definitions that were updated accordingly.
And are we being required to remove that option of the informal?
Yes, if we're going back to 2020 regulations, the 2020 regulations don't allow me to offer someone the option for informal resolution without them filing a formal complaint.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. I have to say, I don't feel at all prepared to count this as a first read through.
Okay.
I feel like I have to actually read through.
And for you, what makes you feel that you're not prepared to have a first read through?
Because well, first of all, because I'm just really weary about making changes based on this, this requirement without feeling like I fully understand every nuance of what we're changing.
Okay.
I just want to be really cautious.
What would be helpful in the sake of just like the process that we kind of like help craft the process better? Would it be helpful for you to feel comfortable with any policy?
Yeah.
Moving forward after first read?
I think this one is just particularly because it's dense. Because we have 4 versions that we're comparing, and because it's a politicized topic right now,
Right.
this feels different.
Okay.
And so for this one in particular, like, I want to go through my tooth before saying I've given it a first read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did email this out last week to everyone, and I, again, as a person who my own self don't always like get to emails in time. I think what we can do is hopefully bring back some more context. I still consider this a first read,
Yeah.
but that's just me. But if the board feels like,
the direction that we want to go is this is not a first read, then we'll have to figure that piece out. But we can bring back feedback. We can follow up with you all with questions that you may have to help you kind of go through the policy to get ready for the second read. And again, the second read doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna have it in our next work group, right? We'll take back the information so that we'll have some time, and so that will hopefully allow board members to also engage with the policy and kind of like go through it a little more in depth based off of the information that we're getting tonight from Avetta and from Petra about some of the, how we've conceptualized and made changes. Does that sound sufficient?
I mean, that sounds great to me, but you know, I'm not gonna even be voting on this. So. Oh, man, I forgot we're in April, we're almost. So, you know, like, you all can say
Yeah.
this is sufficient but I'm saying it, I'm just saying that for the record,
Yes,
like, I would want
more
a lot more
time.
time with anything that comes through that's politicized.
Okay.
And that's tense
Mhm.
and that could have elements of trickiness.
Yeah.
embedded in it.
Absolutely, and I respect that a lot.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. It's the times that we're in. Go ahead, Petra.
Could I circle back to what board member Muldrow asked? So I went through my notes and I apologize. I should have my colleague in legal who actually works on the Title IX stuff be present because this isn't my work stream. So the reason that we would have to adopt this, President Trump ordered all agencies and departments to enforce the 2020 regulations that include OCR, the Office of Civil Rights. And OCR is the one that enforces Title IX. And so it's on that basis that my colleagues in legal did that we adopt the 2020 regulation. Again, unfortunately, I'm not the one that works with it every day, and so I can't speak to all the nuances of it, but I'd love to bring one of my colleagues back at the next read who can answer more specific questions to the extent that Avetta may not be the right person to answer those questions, but also Avetta, if you'd like to jump in on that point.
So I understand what you're saying. I really do. Donald Trump has ordered people to do that. My question is that the legal process? And the example I want to give is that Biden could have said, I want to revert to the Obama's approach to Title IX, right? But he didn't. He engaged in a multi-year process to do that legitimately. So I am concerned about complying with Donald Trump's order in terms of legitimizing a process that I am unaware of at this point is legitimate. Have not seen that approach to Title IX by any other administration. So I know he did that. Is he legally allowed to do that? Is the question. Since I've not seen other administrations engage in that way, I would assume that there is a process that folks are usually required to engage.
Thank you for clarifying. I understand that.
Yeah, I understand that as well. And Petra, thanks for bringing that up. I think sometimes, you know, I know that the directive came from the OCR, and I sometimes I think that's just a given that that everybody knows that. But I think that, you know, I've been to a number of trainings, all Title IX professionals, you know, the TICSA professionals, group of lawyers, Renning and Lewis. I mean, they're all providing trainings to Title IX professionals that, yes, that this was the directive and we need to revert back to 2020. I think that's a good point that you make, Ali. And, you know, I think that's an excellent point that you make. I'm just saying that ironically or honestly, I haven't heard any of those professionals even mention that, right? It's just, this is the directive. The Dear Colleague letter came out. This is what we're told to do. So I think that's good to question that. You know, I personally don't have the answer to it. I'm just going by what, you know, what I've been told.
We definitely will make sure to get some more context and some more feedback. Yeah. Absolutely. I see Blair's hand next.
Oh,
Oh, was somebody else hand up? Sorry.
I didn't. It AI'd me. Just sort of like as you're working on finding more context for board member Muldrow's questions, I would be similarly curious about what, if any, like legal challenges to this are there out there? Yeah, and I'm thinking about other circumstances where there are legal challenges to some, well, I'm thinking of Act 10, where there's legal challenges to an actual judge's ruling.
Mhm.
And we don't make changes until that's sorted. And this is not coming from a judge's ruling, this is coming from something else. So I would be curious in your research and context collection about that. Thanks.
Thank you for that as well. I think, Michelle, did you have anything? No, okay. Huh? Oh, okay. Savian, give you a chance, you're good? Okay, go ahead, Blair.
My only other question, and I apologize for coming in a little bit late,
Oh, no, it's fine.
is when I'm looking at the setup here, like the purpose definitions and then on and on. Do I understand that we have a little bit of like the purpose is where we can talk about our own stuff that's local to the district versus the definitions which are linked to the federal policy?
Avetta, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I just, as a rule of thumb, thought that it would be the best idea to have the definitions because sexual harassment is, as far as Title IX goes, it is defined at the federal level. And that's provided in that 15-page document. So those are the regulations that we follow. So we have to follow those definitions. And so when you talk about, are you talking about that first paragraph there, the purpose?
I think I'm just trying to understand where we have local authority and where we have to be exactly in line with what the federal regulation says.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that. So the federal regulations are like the minimum standard we have to meet. We can add to that, and that is what we've done, right? So for example, just because the 2024 or some of the protections from 2024 have gone away, we don't have to take those away. We can always add to it. It's just the federal the regulations are our starting point.
That's helpful. In line with that, the part where we changed severe or pervasive, I'm in section M.
Yes, yep.
Goes from
That-
severe, yeah, can you tell me about that change?
Yeah, that is one of the required changes. And so that's when I talk about, so the 2024 regulations kind of expanded or widened the range of what can be covered or considered as sexual harassment. And that's how they did that with just one word. So under 2020, I believe it's severe, pervasive, or, and so it had to be one or the other. And then 2024, they changed the, or, no, I take that back. 2020 was severe and, so it had to meet both criteria, right? So 2024 changed the word and to or, broadening that right, widening that pool, right? Because it could be either one. Now we've just reverted to 2020, which puts us back with the or, so it has to be one or the other. So it closes that pool a little bit of what could be considered. But again, that's when I bring up our sexual misconduct, which is N, and that's why we have that. So that we are still capturing the more. Because what doesn't fall under sexual harassment we can capture it under sexual misconduct.
Okay,
Does that make
Yes.
sense?
yes, that's really helpful. Thank you for
Okay.
that.
I didn't have the wording right in front of me, so.
Yeah, but you got
But
it.
yes, that was one of those mandated changes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Is that all for you, Blair?
One more.
Okay, go ahead.
In section 2D, the 2024 policy said that the policy applies to conduct that takes place within the district's education program or activity and conduct that is subject to the district's disciplinary authority, which includes the full range of student and employee policies. And that goes away, that second clause goes away in the proposed new version. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, so that was another one of those changes that broaden that pool of what can be considered. And so under 2024, it required that any behavior, any conduct policy that we had that regulated conduct, Title IX would also cover that. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but yes, under 2020, we were not held to that standard. So that is not going to apply anymore.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me for now.
Thank you, Blair, for those questions. Nichelle? You want to do it no more? Okay. Any other questions? They're looking like none. Again, we'll come back for some of the answers and a little more fleshed out like rationales for the board. My hope is to figure out the policy committee when we will bring it back for a second read. But during that time, we'll make sure like in the meantime to update everyone with like a memo or something to kind of outline the questions that folks had tonight to be prepared for that next read. And there's not any suggestive changes from board members. So it's really for context for folks to kind of think of. So, TJ? I'm trying to read people's facial expressions. Okay, I won't, not tonight. Okay, thank you all for the great question about the Title IX, and thank you, Yvetta, for giving the context and answering our questions. Okay.
Thank
moving
you. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Have a good night. Okay. So we are moving on to policy 1540. 1540 originally was the expectation for school board members. And if you all recall, we took retreat time last year to sit down and as we were thinking about our board governance, to kind of like flush out some of the governance pieces that the board engages in. And at that time, we hadn't necessarily, and still haven't, but considered a governance model. But we were in that works of determining possible movement on that. And our president, Nichols, came forth with some ideas of things that we can work on in the meantime, which was for 1540, the expectations of school board members. From that, if you guys remember, we had a pretty extensive conversation looking at some policies of other districts, hearing districts that had policies around governance for their boards. And we engaged in going pretty extensively line from line, figuring out the ways that we want to craft our ways of working. And so what came out of that was a redlined or a new version of 1540, which is now titled Expectations, Ways of Working for School Board Members of Education. And it pulled out some pieces that we thought were part of a job description for school board members, which would be considered a new policy. And with that, we also kind of tweaked the language to also match how we wanted to engage with the work. And then the last part of 1540, where we talk about the conflict of interest, we moved that to its own standing alone policy, which is also considered a new policy, which is a conflict of interest of a school board member or board of education. And then we also engaged in a conversation around tweaking that one as well. Although we participated in that exercise, that was not considered our first read, but that's fine. So this is where we are considering it our first read so that we can continue some of the work that we've done as a board last summer. And so yes, we can go ahead. If you guys see, you'll have the red line version of 1540, which will still be a policy, and then the two new ones that we parsed out. And so let's first start with 1540. If folks have questions about expectations or ways of working. And so essentially, when you look at it, you can see the blue are the pieces that we are changing or adding language to. And then the red parts are the parts that we actually are taking out and moving into other places. And then the black are the ones that are staying under this policy. Just so like folks can kind of understand how that works. Go ahead, Michelle.
I'll just start by saying I appreciate seeing the clean version of 1540 after we had worked on it a couple of times in the board retreat. And yeah, the original version, even though it's hard to even if you look at the not red line version, the original version that had 17 items, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but we went through all 17 and then it was like, oh, which ones of these are like more like expectations, ways of working? Which of these would be like the job description of a board member? And then there was a item 17 in the original, which is around the conflict of interest, like just as you said, like putting it in its own policy doc. So to me, I appreciate just seeing all of it kind of cleaned out and it feels a lot more succinct, kind of easier to digest. And although these aren't necessarily new things, like they're all coming from an existing policy anyway, I think that it feels cleaner to have like the three separate ones. There isn't anything of major substance that changes about what we are pulling from the original 1540.
Yep. That is true. I think there was just like here and there, we tweaked some words to kind of like, because the last time that we reviewed, or last time that the board has reviewed this 1540, which was the ethics of the board member, was back in 2010 and then again in 2017. So yeah, that's a pretty decent amount of time. So yeah. So good, folks. Savian, go ahead.
Yeah, this reflects conversations we've had. It's nice to have them organized in this manner, particularly the job description for a board member, I think will help out with onboarding new members in the future and help educate to constituents what the role of a board member is.
Thank you for that, Savian. Any questions about 1540 or the conflict of interest or the job description? I'll just put them all together. Blair, go ahead.
I wonder about swapping out his / her for there.
For which one?
Number 3 in policy 1540
Mhm.
and 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
6, 7, the 8th line of policy, the new proposed conflict of interest policy, as well as 13th line.
Yeah.
Oh, and also the 10th orders.
Okay. So updating like the gendered language?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't think I saw it in the
I
job.
don't see that.
So on 1540,
On 1540.
okay,
The
in
one-
number 3.
Yeah.
Its ethical and fiduciary duty shall continue after a board member leaves his/her elected.
Oh, got it.
And I'm suggesting changing incidence of that to their elected office.
Yeah. Thank you. And then was there something else, Blair? I missed
It was the same thing in the conflict of interest one.
Conflict of interest, yeah.
Oh, I see.
We can definitely do that.
And I have maybe 2 more comments.
Yep, go ahead.
One is like so for example, I was late to this meeting and I let the chair of the meeting know, not the superintendent or the board president.
Mhm.
Which I was kind of under the impression was like the thing to do.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we want to indicate that in
Mhm.
job description number 4.
Okay.
And then my comment is about the job description number 3. Be responsive to the public, maintaining open communication lines with community members. I still think that we have some work to do on sort of like our norms around using the word email. Not that it would fall into a policy conversation necessarily, but as I read that, I am reminded that that's still something I feel like, you know, 2 years on the board, still feel a little uncertain about when I am encouraged by the board to respond to individual emails versus not. Since that board email goes to so many people and there are concerns about records and that kind of thing.
So you're thinking of like, just thoughts of like maybe a way to frame that differently or?
No, I think
just,
it's
like,
fine
just-
here. I'm just reminded,
practice.
seeing it in policy, that we need to sort of flesh that out,
Yeah.
flesh out our understanding of that. Those are my comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up to Blair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Blair, as a follow-up on your, that number 4.
Yeah.
If a board member is unable to attend a meeting, the board member will notify. So right now it says the board president or superintendent, but then you made a note about like, oh, or like the person who's chairing an actual meeting. So are you suggesting to include like, or the chair of a meeting, or strike it?
Chair of committee.
No, I mean, I'm also happy to just like notify you and Dr. Gothard instead of Maya at this time, but you know, you're calling the meeting to order, so it makes more sense to me
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
board member Pearson would know that I'm running late.
Mhm.
So maybe if a board member is unable to attend a meeting, the board member will notify the board president, comma, superintendent, comma, or meeting chair
yeah,
prior to the meeting.
City chair.
yeah.
Cause I can also think of it in an instance like, you know, when we had the safety wellness ad hoc, right? Like, and I was chairing that. It's not necessarily like a board meeting per se, but it's a subcommittee or ad hoc. So yeah, I think a committee for ad hoc chair or something like that to kind of encompass all of it.
Yeah. I think the adding the or committee there is good. I do think there's some inconsistencies on how we all practice this, so.
Yeah. At least it gives us a baseline.
I mean, inconsistencies not in a bad way, it's
Mhm.
not, but I think sometimes people are also like just directly letting Jesse know.
Mhm.
And then maybe members of the board don't know,
Mhm.
so. Again, those are just things that we probably continue to practice.
Mhm. And on Sabian's point, like having this like more clear in your point of like not having it 17 things and having it more clear as to what each item is, it makes it easier to kind of hopefully put this better in practice. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, it's just a couple of suggestions.
Okay.
For the expectations with working school board. Member Board of Education. Does Board of Education, first of all, on all three of these, it states Board of Education right after the title? I'm assuming that's for clarity, but it reads really strange.
Yeah.
Is there a way to just note it that it reads a little more like it's not like a running sentence? So like in the conflict of interest one, that might be the best way that it's.
It might be missing the,
Are you talking about it from the title?
yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, that was just,
I think it's,
it's just a thing.
I'm missing the slash,
Yeah.
cause I individually.
Oh, well.
My bad.
So and then expectations and ways of working, I kind of feel like we should pick one.
Okay.
You know, like,
Yeah.
they have kind of different meanings.
Mhm.
What do y'all think? Ali, go ahead.
I don't have an opinion of expectations or ways of working,
Okay.
to be honest. I do have like, in terms of the policy related to the board's role, I am curious about kind of mention of the board's role in passing the budget, the board's role in relationship to the superintendent, and the board's relationship to policy itself. I think of those as the three primary tasks the board is assigned to. And although I find this document to be useful, I find the absence of that in terms of our role in representing the public, to be misleading.
Okay.
I also think the board's role in relationship to expulsion is specific, and the board's role in relationship to specific contractual obligations is specific. And I'm curious about why those things are not in the document in
Mhm.
comparison to other things that feel more like a code of conduct. If I'm, again, ways of working,
Mhm.
expectations, doesn't matter to me what we call it, but it seems to resonate specifically in that way.
I'll turn to Petra here for her suggestion as well. I'm wondering if, because those are covered in state statute, a policy is, first of all, is it required? Obviously, we can create a policy anytime that the board wishes to, but it might be because of that.
I'll have to look into that.
What I would say is either way, and I really appreciate you stating that, because that is how my awareness and orientation to the role was dictated through state statute. But I don't think there's any issue, especially if we're gonna use our own policy to inform the public of our role, and we're gonna use it to onboard folks, to have a policy that reinforces what we're required to do legally by the state.
Mhm.
As we just saw, we create policies that reinforce the federal government. We have policies that that can speak to how we are positioned, our jurisdiction, within kind of legislation.
Yeah, no, thank you.
That's it for me.
Thank you for that, Ali. You want to?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I appreciate that. I think when we were working on this in the retreat,
This is last time.
ways of working came into the conversation because as we went through them, it was like, are these expectations or are they really telling us how to get along and to function together? It seems like some of what was in the original was about ways of working, which is why it ended up kind of like, is this really about ways of working? And not so much about expectations. And then we did have some conversations, to your point, about like what we're statutorily responsible for. But that didn't necessarily end up per se in the job description. Other than saying, well, we comply with the code of ethics for local government officials as set forth, the Wisconsin statute. So, yeah, I appreciate that. I do remember, board member Vandermeulen felt really strongly that like a reference to the state statutes needed to still remain. And it is in the conflict of interest. And it's in the job description, but not to the point that board member Muldrow just brought up. So I think that could be an add.
Yeah, I mean, if you pull up 1959, the Code of Ethics, for Local Government Officials, Employees, and Candidates, I mean, there are, it's pretty expansive, so it talks about No local public official may use their position or office to obtain financial gain. It goes into like, I think these ones are just more so like
The
geared
ethics
towards the
piece.
ethics of being an elected official. But I understand where you're coming from, Ali, about the state statutes that specifically talk about school boards. I think we can like go back and possibly figure out a way to add that if the board feels like that would be a good. So I'm hearing from Michelle and Ali feel like that's good. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not saying to add it to the more expensive relationship to the ethics. I understand. that
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
different. I was more so if we're talking about it as a job description.
Right.
The duties related to
Yeah.
being a board member.
Yeah.
Should include
Yeah.
the things that we are exclusively responsible
Yeah.
for as members of the board. And I think language related to our ability to represent the entirety of the community effectively as elected
Mhm.
officials
Yeah.
is relevant to the role.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, I agree. To answer your question further too, just about like why it necessarily wasn't in there. Just to piggyback off what Michelle just mentioned. I think we had a preliminary conversation, so this is purely from the work that we did last summer,
Yeah.
last fall. But we will definitely take it back and update it based off that, cause I'm seeing nods from folks like absolutely. And finding ways that we can put that in
Yeah.
legal terms. Go ahead, Sarah or Laura.
Yeah, no, so I'll just share, I really clearly remember this conversation
Mhm.
when we were having it, and it was about like just the level of detail that we wanted to include in here, and then also ensuring that if statute change, that we had the statute listed here so that we didn't have to update the policy. So, but I agree, you know, if you're thinking about this in practical terms, it would be really nice to have our, you know, like your roles just very clearly spelled out.
Absolutely.
I mean, like anywhere, but here it is the place that really makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
Quick clarifying question, if I could. Board Member Mulder, I want to make sure I captured the things that you called out as potentially adding here. I heard relationship to passing the budget, relationship to the superintendent. You mentioned expulsions and then specific contractual obligations that the board discusses. Was there, I feel like I maybe missed something.
So policy, superintendent,
Representing the
You
public.
said expulsion budget.
expulsion and budget.
Yeah.
Are roles that are exclusive and
Contractual.
specific to the board. I think you would want people to understand that those things are done explicitly by the Board of Education.
Mhm.
Thank you.
That's good feedback. Okay. Any other questions or comments or adding? Go ahead, Blair.
Can you just remind me the date of the retreat that we worked on?
Yeah. Bring it up.
May 10,
Oh, did I put it on?
2024.
Oh,
Well,
I put on it. Yeah, May 10, 2024. That was the date.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So
If you go back to our emails, I think in September-ish, Nichelle put together a pretty extensive kind of outline of what the changes were. And so essentially how these came to be right here in front of us, it's like I took that information and then like the varied emails that we had back and forth to kind of craft and put these together.
Great.
So yeah, if you check back, that's when, and I can forward it to y'all if y'all want, just to have it at the top of your inbox.
So I think my last comment is about, again, expectations.
Mhm.
The first one on the expectations actually feels like two distinct expectations that are just rolled into one. So I would say encouraging the free expression of opinion by board members, and then a period.
Okay.
And then the second piece, you know, about systematic communications is really a different, although adjoining idea. So my recommendation would be to split it into two numbers.
Two different numbers. Okay. How do board members feel about that? You good? Does that sound? Or just say this sentence, period, and then this
Oh,
would
yeah.
be a new number. That would be number
Yeah.
2.
That makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, edits that folks feel like they would like to do at this moment in this first read? Go ahead, Blair.
I wanted to say my favorite one in the ways of working document,
Mhm.
number 7. I
Mhm.
think it's really, really interesting and really powerful. To think about what we want to see, what kind of conversation and consideration of issues we hope to see in our schools for all of our students.
Mhm.
And how that shows up here.
Mhm.
I really like that one. I like them all. I really, that one's really cool.
Thank you. Anything else, y'all? Okay,
A lot of work on these.
you guys, yeah, we did. Spent a lot of time
It's nice hearing the.
here in the first read. So in the next, for these ones, again, we'll bring these back to a second read. We'll make the update again, informing you all of that. And then we'll also figure out numbers for the 2 new ones. So that they will actually have numbers that we can refer to. And if that's all, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, get a second,
Okay.
second, by Michelle, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Megan, your advisory vote if you're still there.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, well, we are adjourned, y'all have a good night.